Yo, what is good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and in this video, I have another Dynasty trade review for you guys. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. And with that being said, let's get right into this Dynasty trade review. All right, so I made this trade 26 days ago as of recording. Nothing really has changed too much. I meant to record this sooner, but time has just flown by. It is April 21st, the day after 420. But this is the trade I made in Dynasty. I'll get into it and explain it a little bit more. We'll get into Joe Mixon's value and Jamaal Williams, and I'll talk about this rookie pick as well. But basically, I had Joe Mixon on my team, and I traded him away for Jamaal Williams and a 2023 first-round rookie pick. Joe Mixon, a running back of the Cincinnati Bengals. Jamaal Williams, running back of the New Orleans Saints, was on the Detroit Lions last year. And one note is that this rookie pick is actually not the 1.5. We use Flea Flicker, which... Listen, I don't mind Flea Flicker, but it does come with its quirks, we'll call them. And for whatever reason, the rookie picks, are not necessarily like accurate as of now, even though I set the draft order. So I think this is actually like the 1.8 that I got in return. It's not the 1.5. I think it's like the 1.8 is what I believe it should be. But taking a look at this trade, we'll just kind of start off by talking about Joe Mixon. So he is currently 26, but he'll turn 27 in July in a few months. He was the running back 12 in half PPR last season in 2022, and he only played 15 games out of 17. He was the running back 9 in points per game in half PPR. So a good season. I think it was a little bit disappointing coming off of a great 2021. If you want to take a quick look at kind of what he did, I guess, last year. So this is half PPR scoring that we're in. You know, he had his fair share of, all right games in the double digits. He had a few single-digit performances, but this is where most of his production came, was his 53-point performance against the Carolina Panthers, where he had 5 touchdowns, actually, 4 rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown. So if you take that game away, which is not really fair to do, I understand that, but a lot of his production did come in that one game. And actually, you can take a look at his 2021. You can kind of see he had quite a bit more. He didn't really have that huge, 50, 40-point game, whatever it was. But he did have a 30-point game, a lot of, 20 to 30-point games in there. And it was just a little bit more consistent and just a little bit better of a season in 2021, just based strictly on the numbers, okay? So that's kind of where we're at with Mixon. A lot of times these fantasy finishes can be impacted by a lot of things. But his efficiency was down last season. And he played 2 fewer games in 2021, but he saw a whopping 82 fewer carries, okay? So even though he did play a couple less games, that shouldn't have resulted in 82 fewer carries. So the team definitely relied on him a little bit less. Luckily, he was involved in the passing game, so he wasn't involved on the ground, but he was still used in the passing game. So that kind of helped his fantasy production a little bit. And there were definitely some times, though, where Samaje Perine was on the field where you're like, why isn't Joe Mixon out there? So I kind of am getting bad vibes about Joe Mixon's long-term future with the Bengals. His contract does dictate that he can be an unrestricted free agent in 2025, as you can see right here. He's under contract until 2024. So that's a little bit concerning. I don't even know if he will be on the team that long, considering there are reports that he's been asked to take a pay cut. It wouldn't shock me if he gets cut or moved in some capacity. So he might be off the Bengals even sooner than 2025. And after that, who knows where he's going to go. An aging running back, kind of declining in production. I'm not sure he's going to get a big contract or a big opportunity anywhere else. And then there is that whole situation with that shooting near his house that occurred a while ago. From my understanding, he wasn't involved in the capacity that will get him into any trouble. But you just never really know with those types of situations what the outcome is going to be. So probably nothing, but that's just another risk factor with Joe Mixon. The Bengals, the team is Cincinnati, or is Joe Burrow's team at this point, and the offense has transitioned and will continue to transition to primarily operate through the passing game, less of a running team, more of a aerial assault with Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, all that. Assuming Joe Mixon will be still involved in the passing game, and he'll still be somewhat, reliable in the running game and from a fantasy perspective, especially with those scoring opportunities the Bengals should give him on this high-powered offense. I'm sure that Joe Mixon will have another productive fantasy season in 2023 and maybe even in 2024, but by then he'll be 2 years older And in general, my approach to running backs in Dynasty is that I would rather sell high a year or two early on a running back than be even one day too late. Okay. I'm always willing to sell on running backs, especially as they get to those late 20s and that inevitable cliff that all running backs do fall off of at some point. Some running backs fall off of it sooner than others, but once they get past that first contract and a little bit later into their career, that's when I get nervous, okay? So I actually sold a little bit too early on James Conner. I thought his career was coming to an end, and he had a little bit of a resurgence with the Arizona Cardinals. So I could have used James Conner, especially considering I got James Robinson as the main piece in that trade back. So that was a mistake on my part. Joe Mixon could prove me wrong and have another, few more productive years in the tank. And in fact, I expect him to. With James Conner, I thought, I got to get out now. With Mixon, I think he will still have a couple more productive seasons. But I just want to be safe and get something now while I can instead of get nothing when that cliff, shows itself. Because once a running back falls down that cliff, it's very hard for them to climb back out of it. I consider my team a competitive, contending team. I've gotten second place a couple times. I think I got third once or twice. My team is usually in the mix, but I haven't won it. I've made the championship a couple times, but not won it. So my team is competitive, which makes my general approach to running backs in Dynasty. Those two things kind of counter each other because you need running backs to win the championship, but I also don't want to hold on to running backs too long. So it's kind of a yin and yang situation. So I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with Joe Mixon. If you have Joe Mixon on your team and you're a rebuilding team, or if you have any other sort of like higher end running backs, especially ones that are sort of aging, getting to those upper 20s, I would definitely consider selling to a contending team if the price is right. If the price isn't right now, maybe during the season, if your team doesn't have a good record and there's a team that's maybe a running back away and you have one on your team, you can go to that owner and say, hey, you need this player to win a championship. You got to give me a lot. You got to give me some rookie picks, a good young player in return, something like that, okay? I do consider my team a contender, so it's hard to part ways with someone at running back that I consider a difference maker and will offer good production. I didn't consider Joe Mixon a must sell, but I was floating out offers because I kind of viewed him as someone whose value I was hoping to capitalize on while I still could. But that value had to be equal or greater than the value I would get out of Mixon this year as someone helping me win a championship. I was able to get a great return for Joe Mixon, though, which I think this trade is a great return for Mixon. So I had to pull the trigger on the deal. I offered this trade to this manager, and he accepted it. I was thinking I could maybe get just a first-round pick or maybe a second-round pick and then some sort of mid-tier player, whether that's a younger player with some potential or maybe sort of a veteran player that maybe isn't a league winner but just offers me some depth. But I got a first-round pick and Jamaal Williams, okay? Jamaal Williams, running back of the New Orleans Saints. So I kind of talked about my thoughts on Joe Mixon. We'll transition into talking about Jamaal Williams now next. So Jamaal Williams just signed a big contract with the New Orleans Saints. He just turned 28 this month in April. He was the running back 8 in half PPR in 2022, the running back 11 in points per games. He's a veteran running back coming off a career year with the Detroit Lions. He had his first career 1,000-yard season, but anyone can tell you, any person who really knows about fantasy football can tell you, what made him a true fantasy difference maker was one thing, and that is touchdowns, okay? After never having more than 601 rushing yards or 4 rushing touchdowns in any season from what I got on Fantasy Pros, he finished with 1,066 yards and a whopping 17 touchdowns, which led the entire NFL in touchdowns. You can take a look at his game log. He had some huge games in there. Most of it was predicated on these touchdowns here. If you look at his rushing totals, yes, he had 1,000 yards, and that's great. He had 2 100-plus yard performances, it looks like. He had an 81-yard performance, 87. So he had some good games on the ground in terms of rushing totals, but most of his production, what made him kind of elite, was that rushing touchdown production. So not to take anything away from Jamaal, but that type of touchdown production is definitely outlier-ish, I would say. Yes, he does deserve credit for taking advantage of DeAndre Swift, the thought-to-be lead back, kind of struggling with staying healthy. And even when he was active, he wasn't really on the field for whatever reason. So he took advantage of that and put together a monster season and turned that into a 3-year, $12 million contract with the New Orleans Saints. But it is also just as true to say that he did get a little lucky with the Lions often finding themselves on the goal line, putting Jamaal Williams in those positions to punch in those short touchdown runs. A stat I saw was 13 of his 17 touchdowns were from no more than 2 yards out of the end zone. So yes, he does deserve credit for capitalizing on those opportunities, but those circumstances are not common in the NFL. Okay. He was not very efficient. The numbers that we're going to talk about here, like, I'm not really going to get too into it, but something that's a little more indicative of the player instead of being able to punch in a 1-yard rushing touchdown is, his efficiency was not very good, and he did not really show big play ability. I feel confident predicting that 2022 was Williams' most productive season for fantasy. I think he could be productive moving forward, and that's why I was excited to get him on my team in addition to the first-round pick. But expecting a replication of 2022, I think, is not realistic. In 2023, he does get a chance to prove me wrong, though, with the New Orleans Saints. They just got Derek Carr, so we'll see how that offense clicks. I hope he has an even better season than 2022, not only because he is on my Dynasty roster now, but because he appears to be a likable guy. He's always smiling and cracking jokes, even though he was a Green Bay Packer and a Detroit Lion, rivals of my Minnesota Vikings. And I guess he did go to the Saints, which is probably their biggest rival outside of the division. I didn't even think about that till right now. You know what? It's fine. Everyone has their downsides, but I think even despite that, he does appear to be a likable guy. But a big part of his value hinges on the possibility of an Alvin Kamara suspension stemming from an alleged beating incident in February of 2022 around the time of the Pro Bowl. Kamara, he's a super talented running back. He's getting a little bit older, and his production has fallen off the last, however many years since Drew Brees retired. Is that because he's getting older and aging out, or is that because the offense has Andy Dalton out there instead of Drew Brees? It's probably a little mix of both. But if Alvin Kamara does miss time, Williams should start the season hot as a valuable fantasy running back. And even with Kamara active, when he comes back from that suspension, or if he doesn't get suspended, the hope is that Williams does see some sort of volume to make him somewhat fantasy relevant, or goal line opportunities to maintain that fantasy relevance. On one hand, it is fair to expect fantasy regression from Jamaal Williams, especially when it comes to touchdowns. On the other hand, there's definitely a path to opportunity for Williams in New Orleans. And if the chips fall the right way, he might just be a fantasy difference maker for my team and maybe yours, whether that's in redraft or dynasty. For my team, this trade just made sense to me. I've made some good trades and some bad trades in dynasty. We'll see how this one shakes out. Yes, going from Joe Mixon to Jamaal Williams is likely a downgrade, unless, Joe Mixon suddenly falls off that cliff that I was talking about, or if he gets moved, or if they bring in another running back. There's been some talks of that. Or if Mixon does end up facing a suspension stemming from that shooting incident. I'm not really sure what the deal is with that. I don't want to speculate. But there does exist a world where Jamaal Williams is close to, if not as productive as Mixon, depending on how things play out. I don't expect that, but it could happen. It is in the realm of possibility because there's a lot of variables involved with these two players. Either way, I swapped aging veteran running backs with another team, the team that did win the championship actually last year. So I kind of helped him out by giving him Joe Mixon, but I did get that first-round pick and Williams in return. I swapped these veteran running backs, and even though I likely lost value when it comes strictly to those two players going from Mixon to Jamaal Williams, I think I more than made up for that difference by acquiring a first-round pick in the rookie draft. So obviously, like I said, I like to get younger at running back or trade aging running backs, and you might say, well, that doesn't make sense. You acquired Jamaal Williams, who is even older than Joe Mixon. The thing is, the key that made this trade happen was the first-round pick, okay? The first-round pick is where I'm getting younger, getting that young upside where, I can maybe rejuvenate my team a little bit. Hopefully I hit on that draft pick. Jamaal Williams is just depth for losing Mixon in the short term that I can hopefully use to replace Mixon. And a lot of this trade is going to come down to what I do with that pick, okay? I am a contending team, but I still value being able to get a young player who can help my team in the long term and hopefully also in the short term, because we see rookies come in all the time and make an immediate difference. So whoever wins this trade will likely come down to what I do with this draft pick. Again, I think it's the 1/8, We'll see what happens if I go running back and, is that running back plus Jamaal Williams better than Joe Mixon? Do I go wide receiver and get some young receiver that's going to be on my team for the next 10 to 15 years? Or is it going to be a pick that I ultimately cut after a few years, or somewhere in between? Usually there's no in between. I either hit on stuff or I disastrously fail. That's kind of how my team is for whatever reason. But this is the Jamaal Williams contract. I can't remember if I showed that, but he's under contract for a while here. And then this is my team now. This is a half PPR 10-team dynasty league. Got Trevor. I just lost Tom Brady to retirement, so we got Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. Tua. Are those my only 2 quarterbacks on my roster right now? I think they are. Yeah. Then at running back, we have McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. Miles Sanders is my running back 3, so we'll see how he plays in Carolina. But Jamaal Williams is likely my running back 4 or running back 3. I think Joe Mixon would definitely have been, my running back 3, but I had to make a move, get value while I still can. At wide receiver, it's a little good, but not great. Hopkins, we'll see what happens with him if he gets moved. Mike Williams, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore. We have, who else? We have a receiver, Zay Jones. Calvin Ridley's coming back. Calvin Ridley, who used to be on my team. Cortland Sutton, can he finally put something together here? Claypool, I did trade away Deebo Samuel for Claypool years ago before Deebo was that guy. It was literally right before his wide receiver 2 season. Not a wide receiver 2, the wide receiver 2. So, like I said, I did make some trades that hurt me, but I have made some good trades as well, even though I'm only talking about the bad ones. Dallas Goedert at tight end, Kyle Pitts, Greg Dulcich, Dalton Schultz. So a tight end, I'm hoping that we can be solid there at the very least. And then we got Chargers, Cardinals, and Bears on defense. And we got some, depth pieces here as well. These running backs hopefully sign with some teams. We'll see what happens, but it's a 30-man dynasty team with some taxi squad spots. So there's some players on here that I will definitely be cutting to make room for these rookies. I don't have a ton of rookie picks. I think I have 1 first-round pick and a 4th-round pick. So that's another reason why I wanted to make this trade, because I really want to get back in the draft. There is some good value this year, I think. And, I usually don't. I've been trading a lot of my picks lately for veterans, so I kind of want to get back in the draft and get a difference maker. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. Good luck in your rookie drafts. Peace out.